Story 1. I do. It feels much easier and more seamless. Just push one button. It's nice knowing other people are listening to the same thing at the same time. Story 2. My car is 22 years old. How else could I listen to music? Sure, I could burn some compact discs, but regular radio is more comfortable. Story 3. Traffic report. Do not want to deal with faulty Bluetooth that did not reconnect after a quick stop at the store. Story 4. I generally listen to the radio for short drives. It is not worth connecting my phone if I will only be in the car for 10 minutes. Story 5. I listen very rarely, and when I do it is only for sports. I cannot stand the moronic chatter between songs on frequency modulation radio and would rather choose my own music. Story 6. Yes, free entertainment, news, and other programming funded by taxes are provided by Illis Radio in Finland. Story 7. Yes, I do not want to listen to all my good music over and over because you can get tired of a song. Story 8. Yes, CFOX in Vancouver because I need chuckles from familiar voices in the morning. Story 9. No, my music collection starts playing automatically from my phone when I start my car, and I know it will always be a song I like with no ads. Story 10. I paid $500 for a lifetime Sirius subscription about 25 years ago. Story 11. Yes, my MPEG-1 audio layer 3 files play through my phone, and magically I hear the music playing on frequency modulation 87.7. It's the best station now, since there are no radio hosts spewing garbage between songs. Story 12. I had to use it recently while driving work vehicles, and it's worse than I remember. Terrible, cheesy DJs, awful ads, and the same 9 songs on repeat. It's free but feels overpriced. I started bringing a Bluetooth speaker so I can stream what I want or listen to podcasts. Story 13. Frequency modulation radio here. Why? Because my compact disc player is jacked and so is the tape deck. Yes, my Suburban has both. The fact that they do not work ticks me off. Story 14. I do not like ads. They are actively offensive to my ear, and they never seem to play the 20-year-old 1 to 2 hour Radio 1 essential mixes or long sets by electronic music artists I like. Story 15. Frequency modulation radio can be a nice change of pace. Some stations put in the effort to mix their tracks and offer unique curated playlists. I find it refreshing from time to time since algorithmic radio stations on streaming services can get old quickly. Story 16. No, I have never been into mainstream music, so I have never listened to the radio in my car on a regular basis. It was tapes, then compact discs to an iPod, and then streaming. Story 17. Do you mean listening to the radio in general, or specifically the amplitude modulation and frequency modulation radio frequencies? I am from Germany. Amplitude modulation radio was never really common here, at least not since the 1980s. It has always been frequency modulation from 88.8 to 108.0 MHz. Digital audio broadcasting has been around for at least 15 years, and the stations I occasionally listen to are available on it. Personally, I mostly listen to podcasts and audiobooks, but from time to time I switch to the public broadcasting news station Deutschlandfunk. The average commute in Germany is about 30 to 60 minutes, and people still listen to the radio, mostly channels that play the best hits from the 1980s, the 1990s, and today. They usually do not update the today part. Story 18. National Public Radio, Sports Talk, College of DuPage Jazz. Yes, I'm that dude. Story 19. How else am I going to listen to National Public Radio? Plus, my damn car hijacks my phone and forces a connection whenever it is in the car, even if I am just the passenger. When it plays audio, I cannot control the volume because I cannot tell which app or device is controlling it at that moment, whether Toyota Connect, my phone buttons, the radio, Android Auto, or Pandora. Instead, an unbalanced, blastingly loud YouTube ad will play and cannot be closed because YouTube runs minimized and continues playing when the app is closed. Bluetooth still is not ready for prime time. There is so little device feedback to troubleshoot issues. I was excited to have unlimited data and streaming music, but within a week the car and my phone had forgotten each other. Story 20. The only time would be if the local hockey team's game is being called on the radio and I happen to be in the car. Story 21. I don't anymore. I listen to my playlists depending on my mood. Story 22. No. I listen to digital audio broadcasting when I have the radio on, usually only when I am driving to work in the morning. Story 23. No. It started in 2004 or 2005 because of the iPod mini, except for a few talk shows such as Howard Stern, Art Bell, Phil Hendry, and local shows. Forget about it now. Story 24. I only occasionally listen to local news on frequency modulation radio. Otherwise, I listen to Sirius or playlists. Story 25. No. I only listen to a few music genres, and I probably would not find them on frequency modulation radio unless I were in Europe. Hardstyle and deathcore. Story 26. No. I grew tired of hearing the TikTok top 10 repeated on nearly every music station. Story 27. Yeah. Mine just stays on National Public Radio unless they are airing a game show. I like the interviews and news reports. Calms me. If the program isn't feeling good, I put on classic rock. Story 28. Yes. It is free. There is a lot of local content, but also National Public Radio and general news. The music is not what I would normally seek out, but it is new and I can find recent songs and artists. I love regular old radio, and I also listen to podcasts and similar content. Story 29. Yes, mostly because I don't want to fiddle with apps to pick podcasts or playlists. I do sometimes, but I often just stick with the radio, sports talk, National Public Radio, or our local jazz station. Story 30. I usually listen to my YouTube music feed, but I'm an old National Public Radio listener and always catch the morning news and the artificial intelligence segments. Story 31. Yes. I listen to the Southern California classical music station. Story 32. Yes, when I do not feel like connecting my phone and deciding what to play. Story 33. Yes. Every time I am in the car, I listen to some great local radio stations for music and to National Public Radio. Story 34. No, because there are too many commercial breaks, or they play the same song every hour or so. It is important for quick traffic reports or emergency situations. Otherwise, it is not for me. Story 35. I like a local National Public Radio station. Our nation is so vast that I find it interesting to hear about the issues in other areas I drive through. Story 36. Yes, because it's radio and I'm in my car. These things just go together. Story 37. Most of the time it is Sirius XM satellite radio or YouTube music via Android Auto. I also maintain both amplitude modulation and frequency modulation radio stations for when connectivity becomes an issue because I live in a very rural area. Story 38. No. Full of advertisements. My high-capacity universal serial bus flash drive fills the gap admirably. Story 39. No, I can't deal with 5 minutes of music followed by 12 minutes of ads nonstop. Story 40. As soon as I got my iPod Shuffle, I stopped listening to the radio. I do not like the ads or the lack of control. I also discovered Audible and podcasts. Story 41. I turn to National Public Radio when I get tired of music or audiobooks and want the news. Story 42. This is for news and traffic reports, mostly. It is a 1.5 hour drive each way, and I need to rest my brain instead of trying to learn a new skill while stuck in traffic, as many audiobooks encourage. I also have more attention available to watch out for inattentive pickup truck drivers. Rest is just as important as being active. Story 43. I still listen to WXRT on the frequency modulation band in Chicago because it is the greatest radio station with real disc jockeys who play the best music. I have Sirius in the car, but the variety of music on individual stations is limited, and I find the disc jockeys boring and occasionally annoying. Story 44. 1. There's a student-run college station in town with very eclectic programming. Sometimes it can be hit or miss depending on what the disc jockey is into, but I often hear interesting new music. If it's not something I'm into, I put on a compact disc. 2. I follow baseball and football games when I have to be driving. 3. On rare occasions I might check out sports-related talk shows. Story 45. I pay for Sirius XM instead. I tried regular radio, and it is terrible by comparison. Story 46. Yes. National Public Radio is one of the last shreds of truth available. Story 47. I listen to my local national public radio station during my commute at least 2 times per week. Story 48. Local national public radio and radio sports. Spotify has killed the music on the radio concept. Story 49. Yes. I do not always have access to an auxiliary cable for my cell phone. Hell, I still scroll through the stations to hear what is being broadcast these days. Story 50. Well, they usually play pretty good music to start with. My car doesn't have Apple CarPlay, so it's just easier. Story 51. Sometimes, yes, probably sports talk. There is also an Iron Maiden CD that has been stuck in there for years. I throw it on occasionally. Story 52. Yeah, my car stereo is broken, and for some reason talk radio works on some days. It is excruciating. Story 53. Very rarely. Usually on public radio for something different. Otherwise my choices are mostly country, hard rock, or 3 virtually identical pop stations. Story 54. I use the frequency modulation radio because my ride is so short and it is an older vehicle, so connecting Bluetooth is too much work. Story 55. I listen to frequency modulation radio sometimes while I drive or when I'm working in the garage. However, lately I just drive in perfect silence. There is too much going on in my life and in the world, and I feel overwhelmed by it all. Story 56. Yes, because the stock radio in my car is poor and won't automatically connect to my phone. Every time I start it, I get blasted with amplitude modulation and frequency modulation broadcasts, and it's somehow always advertisements. Story 57. Not usually. I prefer the satellite radio service because there are no commercials. Story 58. No. I have had Sirius XM for 12 years and love it. I got a 3-year $149 deal earlier this year. Story 59. I have Sirius and I like it, but I still listen to frequency modulation radio pretty regularly. Story 60. I only listen to Packers or Brewers games. I cannot think of any other reason to turn on the radio anymore. Story 61. There are 2 stations where I live. One is on frequency modulation playing folk, and the other is on amplitude modulation playing oldies. They are relaxing and one is always on. Story 62. I sit in the parking lot before going into work and listen for about 5 minutes while they play the Guess the Song game. I do not know why, but I really enjoy that. Otherwise, I listen to Sirius satellite radio or my iPod. Story 63. I stopped when I discovered podcasts about a decade ago. Story 64. There are too many commercials and the music today is horrible, so I listen only to my own music. Story 65. I listen to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation radio all the time. It plays adult alternative rock with no commercials and news on the hour. There is very little top 40 pop. Saturday nights feature jazz, and classical music plays during the day. There is opera, curated hip-hop, and many shows scheduled throughout the week. Story 66. As a very isolated person, I like hearing about what is happening in society. I enjoy listening to programs I would not normally choose, even when I select that station. Story 67. I am a hybrid listener. I listen to radio in my car using a free radio app on my phone for stations that are not local. Listening to WFMU or similar public radio stations is incomparable. Regarding music discovery and community, passionate radio disc jockeys who spend time listening to music and curating radio shows are a valuable source for me. It is not just exposure to emerging artists. It is a way to steep myself in the roots, the pigeonholed past, and the whole tapestry, from noteworthy to niche. There are also times I listen to my own playlists or play full albums outside of radio, but my playlists have been neglected. Story 68. Los Angeles. KNX 1070, or whatever their frequency modulation station is now. The ads are annoying, but I like my traffic reports on Interstate 10. Story 69. Yes. I listen for local content. News, traffic, community information, and music. I listen to Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Radio, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Music, CKUA Radio Network, and CJSW Radio in Calgary, Alberta. Story 70. Yes, because Ford did not adopt wireless Apple CarPlay until a few years ago. Often, for short rides or if I forget, I do not want to dig out my phone and plug it in. Story 71. Only when I wake up early enough to listen to the morning radio. Hey, free beer and hot wings. Story 72. My husband listens to the Knucklehead on the morning drive time show every day. He uses iHeartRadio now. We don't go out in the morning anymore since we retired. Otherwise, I turn off the radio so we can talk in the car. Story 73. Mainly the local national public radio station or the entertainment and sports programming network affiliate when they are not talking about baseball. I do not travel enough to justify XM satellite radio and usually reserve Spotify for work. Story 74. Yes, a local frequency modulation radio station because I am old and it is what I know. Story 75. There is only one good station in our city that plays rock music, so sometimes I listen to it. Story 76. I listen to National Public Radio on my way to and from work most of the time. Why? They have jazz and classical music on the weekends and fun programs like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, Science Friday, All Things Considered, and so on. Story 77. I have not watched in at least 10 years. Why sit through 30 minutes of commercials and other non-show nonsense when podcasts exist? I make my own music. I like to listen to what I want when I want and for as long as I want. I can listen to a morning or afternoon show and skip all the commercials, on-air reads, bumpers, and show announcements. How much actual show do you get? 20 to 25 minutes. Life is too short for that nonsense. I do not even watch football live. I cannot remember the last time I saw or listened to an entire commercial. Story 78. Yes, but change the station as soon as commercials start. If I can't find one of my presets playing anything, I just turn it off and drive for a few minutes. Story 79. I like National Public Radio and North Country Radio for political discussions that are mostly free of rants. There are also good music shows featuring Latin music, blues, and old rhythm and blues. I do not drive much anymore, but when I have to, I like to listen to something uplifting without advertisements that make you want to end your life earlier than expected. Story 80. The stations I listen to have all converted to digital. Unfortunately, they cut out instead of maintaining a signal. Story 81. After I moved to Atlanta, I listened to a revitalized rock station. A few months later, I realized their morning show reused segments and I grew tired of it. Although I enjoyed the music, the commercials were annoying, so I opted for Spotify to have more variety. Story 82. I worked in radio for 2 decades, so I'm pretty averse to it now. I keep it tuned to static so that if I don't get my phone plugged in on time, I still don't have to hear it. Story 83. No, because my typical commute is 10 minutes, and I am okay sitting in silence before I go to preschool for 8 hours. Story 84. No, I haven't in 30 years. They play few songs, and most are ones I don't want to listen to. Story 85. No, the stations around me are not good, and there are not many of them. Story 86. 90% of the time, yes. I have no need for satellite when I have a huge digital library of my own, actual high-quality audio files, not Spotify or digital rights management. Story 87. I absolutely do not, but I mostly listen to audiobooks in the car, which are not really available on the radio. Story 88. Yes, the local stations here are actually pretty good. I get to keep up with what people using meth are doing, where traffic is becoming congested, and what fun events are coming up this weekend. It's local radio or the sweet note of dual exhaust. Story 89. Absolutely not. I can't stand the ads, disc jockeys, or any of it. I mostly listen by streaming on my phone, although I do enjoy Sirius satellite radio occasionally. Story 90. Yes. I listen to public radio on frequency modulation and the local classic country station on amplitude modulation. I am a sound junkie. I need to have music, radio, or something on all the time. It is weird. Story 91. Yes, the local news and talk radio station has some really good shows. Story 92. My 2024 model year car, built in July 2023, does not even have an amplitude modulation radio. Story 93. Yes, the local top 40 station. I like their morning show, and it is the only way I learn about new music. Unless I am on a long road trip, I do not find it worthwhile to stream from my phone. Story 94. If I am in a work vehicle, generally yes. I will also listen if there is a sports broadcast I want to hear while driving. Story 95. Local amplitude modulation radio for morning traffic and news. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation frequency modulation radio for local and national news and content. Story 96. Normally I listen to podcasts, but if I'm driving in the morning, which is rare, I'll listen to the radio. A friend of mine for nearly 25 years has her own show, so I try to support her by listening. Story 97. I would, but the car radio has a hard time receiving that station, so I rely on XM satellite radio. Story 98. Honestly, sometimes those amplitude modulation radio stations offer a revealing view into the minds of fearful conservatives. Every now and then it is fun to tune in to a random amplitude modulation radio station where an older man agrees with callers who say things like this. A man in a dress, which I think was a utilikilt at Walmart, is a symptom of societal degradation. Radio Shack not stocking, amateur radio parts or not knowing what parts those radios need, is a symptom of societal degradation. He claims leaded gasoline was not that bad because he was fine after soaking his hands in it for years, and he repeats that before the host moves to the next caller. People not knowing how to make jam or pickles is a symptom of societal degradation. He says, amplitude modulation radio is an absolute hoot. Story 99. Yes, absolutely. I love the morning show in San Diego on Rock 105.3, and then I listen to KFI amplitude modulation 640 for news from Los Angeles for the rest of the day. Story 100. No, I have CarPlay and my phone automatically connects to it. I have many perfectly curated playlists with no commercials or interference when I am driving over the mountains. Story 101. Mostly I listen on my iPhone using iHeartRadio. My favorite station is in Lincoln, Nebraska. I also listen to Omaha and Minneapolis stations for talk radio and to an occasional podcast. Story 102. Listener-supported frequency modulation classical music station and non-profit independent low-power frequency modulation station. There are essentially no commercials. Story 103. I listen to National Public Radio, Sports Talk, and News Talk. Story 104. News Talk 1010 for the morning drive and Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Radio 1 for the drive home in the Greater Toronto Area. Story 105. Absolutely not. My drive to work takes about 17 minutes, from my garage to the office parking garage. One morning my phone would not connect to my car stereo, so I turned on the radio. There is a morning show I used to really like, and I figured I would listen to it instead. I tuned the radio just as the show went to a commercial break, and I am not joking. The entire drive to work was nothing but commercials. The show returned just as I pulled in. I would honestly rather listen to silence than to only ads. Story 106. No, I never listened to the radio. By the time I got my first car in 2011, I had a dock for my iPod Classic. Since then, I have always listened to my own music. Story 107. I have not listened to the radio in my car since the 1990s. I hate advertisements and really do not like someone else picking my music for me. I have used a combination of MPEG audio layer 3 players and streaming services for all those years, and I would listen to nothing rather than a commercial radio station. Story 108. If I have a company vehicle, yes, because I am not bringing my compact discs to work and the vehicle does not have Bluetooth. In my car, only if, for whatever reason, my Bluetooth does not connect and I do not have an emergency compact disc. Story 109. Yes, in the car wash. Then it is back to satellite once I am out. Story 110. Sometimes my phone takes a long time to connect to Bluetooth. Story 111. Yes, I need my children to learn that not everything is available on demand as soon as they want it. Story 112. Yes, my local adult contemporary rock station is better than any channel on Sirius, and I get local news and weather in exchange for some ads. Story 113. It is more commercials than content now. The same 5 ads play on loop for months. The news actively depresses me and makes me angry, cold, and bitter toward the world and everyone in it. If I cannot listen to the music stored locally on my phone, I listen to nothing. It is better than the radio. Story 114. Yes, it is convenient. I have a few stations saved, so I can easily change the song if I do not like one. It is also more accessible to use when driving because it has physical buttons I can operate by touch. Story 115. Sometimes I only listen to classic or alternative rock. I live in the middle of nowhere. I receive one of the few remaining legitimate local stations with a local morning show, and I receive another station from about an hour away. When I used to commute to work, I could listen to the local station for about half the ride. I usually listen to podcasts. I cannot really stream because in the middle of nowhere I have 1 bar of cellular signal. Story 116. I am not always in the mood for podcasts. I have SiriusXM, but I appreciate Morning Edition and All Things Considered, which the National Public Radio channel does not carry. I sometimes prefer the eclectic music selection on the sister station of my local National Public Radio news station. Similarly, some Orioles games are not on SiriusXM, and for Ravens games I prefer to tune into the flagship station rather than search the dial. Story 117. Local conservative news and talk radio, except when the game is on. Story 118. Almost never. The occasional baseball game on amplitude modulation radio. 95% streaming music or podcasts. Story 119. Usually, if I do not feel like fiddling with my phone to play music, I would say about 30% of the time overall. Story 120. On Sundays, the station plays all classical music. It is usually peaceful, and sometimes they play film scores. Story 121. Listen to country music and our local sports talk station. Story 122. Amplitude modulation for talk radio and, very occasionally, frequency modulation for music. Story 123. I have a couple of frequency modulation radio stations saved in Quick Select, so I can put on some noise if I am driving for less than 10 minutes and cannot be bothered to connect my phone to the speakers and select a playlist. Story 124. One thing at a time. I can drive or search for my old Motown or disco tunes. Story 125. Oh, definitely. I always find it interesting to scan the lower frequency modulation radio dials when visiting unfamiliar places, just to hear what they offer. Story 126. We have a fantastic community radio station in Tucson that I love. It carries National Public Radio and about 15 minutes a month of right-wing talk radio. When I travel east of Arizona, I like to use Seek, and I find a lot of cool stations. Story 127. No, the radio is terrible. The ads are intrusive, long, and annoying. Story 128. Yeah, because my Toyota RAV4 only connects to my phone half of the time. Story 129. Very infrequently. I found the excessive number of commercials frustrating. I stopped listening to it around 2017 or 2018. Even before then, I mostly just connected my phone to my car via a cassette adapter with an auxiliary cable. Story 130. Free beer and hot wings. Dumber than the show trivia. Anyone? Also, I bought a universal serial bus plug-in compact disc player to play all my old compact discs. Story 131. Sometimes I have a short drive and just need a little music to get me there. Even on longer trips, I like to have the radio on, especially road trips, because it is fun to listen to local stations as I pass through a place. On those short trips, it is maddening when I have only a minute or two left and every station is airing a commercial. Story 132. Radio Boise, KRBX 89.9, a full-on freeform station. Stream it at radioboise.org. Story 133. I rarely find more than 2 good songs in a row, so I always end up playing one of my YouTube playlists. Story 134. Frequency modulation radio. I rarely drive our car, and when I do, it is only about 1 mile from the house. Story 135. No, I cannot stand commercials. The constant begging for sales is annoying. Story 136. I do because my car audio only holds 6 compact discs. That is not enough music variety, and I am too lazy to swap compact discs in and out. Story 137. Yes. National Public Radio and a few jazz stations are always easy listening for me. Story 138. Yes, there are far fewer stations in the United Kingdom than there used to be. They are mostly the British Broadcasting Corporation or a single large company that owns the commercial radio stations. There are a few community stations, but they cover only a small area. Story 139. I have a relatively new car with modern features, but I listen to frequency modulation radio on my drive to work. I like my local radio station and the rock music they play in the morning. For all the music available on Spotify, the algorithm is poor and the selections become very repetitive. The local business jingles and advertisements are so cringeworthy that listening to them is worth it for that alone. Story 140. I listen to the local traffic report and sometimes sing along to the radio if I am trying to stay awake. Story 141. I listen to National Public Radio and I like my local morning show. Sometimes I do not want to think about what to listen to and just need something, so I cycle through 5 or 6 local stations. Story 142. I am Generation X. Even in cars that have Bluetooth, I listen to the radio. When I am traveling, the scan button is my friend. Story 143. It rarely happens, but when I forget to hit the media button, my feed is nothing but commercials, and I am reminded why I have routed my phone to my pie hole at home. Story 144. Sports. If the game's on while I'm driving, I'm listening. Story 145. Yes. My work is 10 minutes away, and I feel it is a waste of time to connect to a Bluetooth wireless connection for such a short ride. I also like to listen to my local radio station for the news in the area. Story 146. National Public Radio has 2 stations, one for news and one for music, plus a cool alternative station that is light on commercials. All are on the frequency modulation band. Story 147. Not really. When I got my first car, I insisted on removing the radio to avoid paying broadcasting fees. Stations around here are poor, so I played a compact disc in my second or third car. I never installed a very high frequency / ultra high frequency transceiver in any car, but tuning into the nearby 70 cm repeater using frequency modulation would have made sense. Story 148. I used amplitude modulation radio to catch baseball or football on occasion. I was excited my new electric vehicle even came with one. Story 149. Yes. I listen to my local public radio stations here in Seattle. National Public Radio, classical stations, jazz and blues, and college radio. I stopped listening to commercial radio. Story 150. Not since digital radio was launched nationally 26 years ago. Come on, guys. It is the 21st century. Next you will be telling me you still write checks. Story 151. I used to listen to podcasts during my commute, but my current job is only 10 minutes down the road, so it's easier to listen to the radio. Story 152. Sometimes I listen to 101.1. If I'm driving in a different area, I scan the radio to see what it is like. Story 153. Not at all. I have all the music I want to listen to on my phone, and I can skip until I find something I like. Story 154. When I have to drive during a hockey match, I always listen to it on the radio. Story 155. A local station that provides weather, traffic, and community stories. For road trips, use compact discs or streaming podcasts. Story 156. I haven't listened to the radio in about 10 years. I prefer choosing my own music and finding songs myself. But that's just me. Story 157. It depends on the length of the drive. On short local drives, it will probably be the radio. On road trips, it will be Spotify or an audiobook. Story 158. A local morning show on the way to work and a podcast on the way home. Story 159. No. I like radio for music, and good radio stations don't exist anymore, so I listen to satellite radio. Story 160. Actually, I did last week. We had some local stations change formats, so I checked them out for the day. I returned to Sirius XM satellite radio. Story 161. I used to listen to National Public Radio, but now I listen to Spotify, Radiolab, and science and comedy podcasts. Story 162. I listen to National Public Radio when I am too lazy or indecisive to pick something to listen to. Story 163. No, I stopped because for some reason it sounded bad in my last car. It was strangely muffled. I tried changing all the audio settings, but it did not make a difference. It did not affect Bluetooth, compact disc, or auxiliary input. Only frequency modulation radio was affected. I switched to Sirius XM, which has its own quality issues such as low bit rate, but in that car it sounded much better. I have stuck with it because I enjoy several stations and the lack of advertisements is essential to me. Frequency modulation radio advertisements were always annoying, and after living without them I could not go back. I also use Spotify via Android Auto sometimes, particularly on road trips. For driving around town, SiriusXM is the easiest option. Story 164. Yeah, I listen to the news station. A lot of the time I don't have anything on at all. Story 165. Partly because I got sick of the music on the radio. Honestly, it feels like I hear the same 3 or 4 songs every hour when I am in the car. I would rather stream music and listen to what I want. Story 166. Yes. My commute is about 7 minutes long, and I do not have unlimited data, so it is easier to let the local stations play. Story 167. Absolutely not. I have only had my 2014 car for a year, and it has satellite radio. However, I find myself switching stations a lot, as I would with amplitude modulation and frequency modulation radio, but without the commercials. Story 168. Unfortunately, my child always wants to use my phone to watch Spider-Man. Story 169. Hell no. I already have to listen to the same radio songs and annoying ads at work all day. There is no way I would willingly listen to them in my own time. I put on a podcast from my phone whenever I am driving, and that is perfect for me. Story 170. Yes. Fishing my phone out of my pocket, connecting a universal serial bus cable, unlocking the phone, pairing with Android Auto, and getting music playing is too much hassle if I am just running to the gas station. I would rather just turn on the radio and listen to something more interesting than wind noise. Story 171. My electric car is in the shop, so I am driving my older Land Rover. I keep forgetting to take some compact discs with me, so I listen to frequency modulation radio. The commercials are annoying. Story 172. Yes, because all classical Portland is on there and it is great. Story 173. Yes, every day. Even though my area is mostly country music, I have found a good alternative and variety station, and I enjoy the jams too. Story 174. Oh no, not for 15 to 20 years. Like many others, my phone connects to my car using Apple CarPlay, so I use YouTube Music or podcasts. Story 175. I was at home washing the dishes. Why? It's a decades-old routine, to be honest. Story 176. I do not. Commercials. 1 of 4 songs by Pink Floyd. 1 of 3 songs by Rush. The only song Warren Zevon ever did. 1 of 3 songs by the Eagles. 1 of 5 songs by Led Zeppelin. 1 of 2 songs by Yes. 1 of 2 songs by Heart. 1 of 3 songs by Phil Collins. It's torture. Story 177. Yes. Frequency modulation radio from National Public Radio is available. We have 2 local stations. Story 178. Sometimes college stations and National Public Radio are about all I can stand anymore. Even then, I still shout back at National Public Radio sometimes. Granted, I did not listen to the whole segment. I was, busy with errands. But in all the talk on Wednesday or Thursday about the private equity sale of Electronic Arts, I did not hear a single word about how much microtransactions suck. They only described microtransactions as a wonderful innovation in financing game companies. Being better than cable news is a low bar. I would love it if they could aim higher like they used to, rather than being proud of a small hub. Story 179. On the way to work, I listened to Bonnie Tyler, just like my dad did. On the way home, I listened to Bonnie Tyler, just like my mom, because I think that's what it says in the Bible. Story 180. I listen to Sirius XM satellite radio or Apple Music for 75% of the day. My local frequency modulation station is on every morning from 6 to 10 in the morning while I am at work. Keeps me up to date with local happenings, but the advertisements get a bit annoying. Story 181. My 6-year-old car still has the factory presets untouched. Terrestrial commercial radio is unlistenable. Story 182. Sports talk radio is typically all I have on the radio. My wife likes the usual top 40 frequency modulation station for her morning commute. I have always liked talk radio. Story 183. Yes. My car is 18 years old and does not have any integrated connectivity. Story 184. Yes, I do. I listen every morning on my way to work. I listen for the news, not for the music. All they ever play are 80s songs and top 100 hits. I love the 80s, but it seems they do not play metal much. Story 185. No, the kind of music I listen to, mostly 90s rock and alternative, does not pick up well where I live. So I just play Spotify. Story 186. Yes. I rarely tune to a different station. Only when I leave the broadcast area. It's easier. The radio does its thing and I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. Disc jockeys can be annoying occasionally, but that is the exception rather than the rule. It is free. No subscription required. Story 187. We used to have the best talk radio station in the Bay Area until Cumulus bought it and ruined it. Now I listen to a news station, but I miss those days. Story 188. Yes. Frequency modulation is used mainly for National Public Radio, entertainment and sports programming network radio, and the news station that broadcasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the local National Broadcasting Company affiliate. Story 189. Yes. I'm tired of paying monthly fees for everything in my life just to rent entertainment. Laughing out loud. I have a flash drive with some songs I love in case they are talking too much on the radio. Story 190. Every Monday through Friday morning on my way to work, I listen to the Bob and Tom Show. I grew up listening to it with my parents. It is nostalgic and, of course, funny. Story 191. The ads are annoying, the songs are repetitive, and the commentary is poor. Morning show hosts are usually unfunny. When they are not, you must wade through many ads and dull segments to find the highlights, so it is not worth it. I prefer British Broadcasting Corporation radio to amplitude modulation and frequency modulation radio. Again, not amplitude modulation and frequency modulation, but I won a free year of Sirius XM satellite radio, and listening to Octane radio was enjoyable. It is not worth paying for, though. Story 192. It's been years since I last listened to the radio. I give it about 20 years before it becomes extinct. Story 193. Yes, frequency modulation radio. It is free, it does not use my metered data plan. It provides local news and gives me a chance to discover new songs. Story 194. I have switched to classical music. Rock music usually has lyrics that steer my mind. I prefer classical music in the background so I can explore my thoughts and never run out of things to think about. I use frequency modulation radio and my own wireless local area network. Story 195. I worked on digital audio broadcasting car radios for years in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, the extra bit rate is used to increase the number of stations, so there are many niche or local stations. At my desk, I used to listen to a station where Alice Cooper was a DJ. He was an interesting guy with many anecdotes about life as a rock star. In Germany, they use the extra bit rate to increase audio quality, which, in my humble opinion, is a waste of time in most vehicles. When I started, digital audio broadcasting was not very good, but since some frequency modulation transmitters have been converted to digital audio broadcasting, it is much better. As you drive, your radio switches seamlessly between transmitters. Story 196. My car is in the shop now, but yes, I listen to the radio, mostly country stations. Story 197. My local corporate rock fusion channel still gets it right on occasion. Usually it is pretty inoffensively bland, but occasionally a banger from the 1980s or 2000s comes on and you cannot help but sing along. Then something awful plays or what feels like a 15-minute ad break starts, and it goes off for a few days until I remember to turn it on again. Story 198. I used to zone out for hours in my car, just thinking about life while listening to the nice, calm public radio announcers. I liked the chatter. I did not even process it. Story 199. I held on to amplitude modulation sports radio for a long time, but in the last few years it has only streamed podcasts and music. Story 200. I drive through 2 mountain ranges on the way to work. There is no station I can tune into for the whole ride. It is YouTube music for me nowadays. Not that radio is really worth listening to anymore. Most major stations are owned by 1 or 2 companies, and they have a hard time keeping political bias out of their programming. The bias is subtle and shows up in which disc jockeys they hire, how they select songs, which news they report during news breaks, and which sponsors receive preferential treatment. Story 201. My morning commute coincides with a couple of segments on the local talk show that I find amusing and engaging. I do not have to decide what to listen to or wade through Spotify. Story 202. I used to listen to the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network radio all the time. I am not sure what happened to it. The same local stations are now run by Fox Sports Radio. The best morning lineup was Mike and Mike from 6 in the morning to 10 in the morning, followed by The Herd. Story 203. Sometimes I put on my audiobooks when I am in the car alone. If the family is in the car, the FM radio goes on unless someone wants to play music from their phone. I am not going to fiddle with Apple Music or Spotify while I am driving. My wife has satellite radio in her car, but I refuse to pay for it. Story 204. Yes. Every day. 2012 Honda Civic, 195,000 miles. I spend many hours listening to sports talk and National Public Radio. Story 205. I still listen to frequency modulation radio in the car. It is the only thing I can listen to that is free. Story 206. Yes. The local classic rock radio station is popular, and children also listen to the Top 40 station. Story 207. Yes, because I am terrible at making playlists. There is a phenomenal public music station in town, so I get advertisement-free listening to boot. Story 208. I do. It's just white noise. I will switch to the next station during every commercial. Story 209. I still love the radio, especially on cross-country trips. I enjoy hearing stations in different regions, which types of music are popular, and the on-air personalities. Story 210. Yes. I like being surprised by musical selections across different genres. Story 211. Yes. I drive 600 miles each way every week for work. I enjoy listening to local radio and hearing about local events in the towns I pass through. It is comforting in a way. Story 212. Only when my wife's CarPlay malfunctions and decides that frequency modulation is better than the current source. Laughing out loud. Story 213. For the same reason, I like hotel television. Sometimes I do not want to choose. Story 214. I have not listened to the radio in more than 20 years. I do not enjoy random music or pop. I am mostly interested in punk, metal, and jazz. No local station offers these genres, as far as I know. I have worked from home for the past 14 years. When I need to drive, it is only a short distance. Story 215. Sometimes I enjoy local talk radio, and it's nice not always knowing what content is coming at me. Story 216. I am really fortunate to live in an area that has fun, unique talk radio on weekdays. It entertains me and is interesting without being overly political. The hosts touch on stories and current events, but they do not go overboard. Story 217. No. I have satellite radio. I prefer it for my commute. Story 218. I listen on amplitude modulation in the morning to the local radio talk show. If the topic does not interest me, I switch to frequency modulation, which is broadcast in the United States. I am in Canada. Anytime after 12 p.m., I always listen to frequency modulation. Sometimes I play a compact disc, depending on my mood. Story 219. I have SiriusXM, and I enjoy it much more. It offers multiple music stations that cater to my tastes, plus channels for sports, news, stand-up comedy, and more. I listen to a local sports show on my phone, but that's about it. Story 220. It depends on where I am. I will in the United Kingdom, but probably not in the United States unless I cannot get connected. Once in a blue moon I will, because it just feels like something I want to do. Story 221. Yes. We have a local station that plays American roots music you do not hear anywhere else. It is a public station, so there are no commercials. All hail WMOT 89.5 in Murfreesboro and Nashville, Tennessee. Story 222. I use amplitude modulation radio for talk and news. I use Sirius XM satellite radio to play specific genres of music without advertisements. Story 223. No. I listen to nothing half the time and to audio via Bluetooth on my phone the other half. Story 224. Technically, I need to resync my satellite radio for about 30 seconds every 6 months. Story 225. The local college has a radio station that is truly one of the best I have heard in my life. WRFL in Lexington, by the way. Story 226. I do it all the time. I get most of my news that way. At nighttime, I tune across the amplitude modulation band and pull in distant stations. It's fun. Story 227. No, I am using Sirius XM satellite radio. Tell them you are dropping the service after your free 3 or 6 months, and you can get it for $3 a month. Story 228. I listen to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation when I drive. It depends on what is on. I will switch to a podcast if I am not into the program. I do not know why. There is just a lot of good content. I suppose I could get the same content through podcasts, but I like the schedule, and it is hard to pick things to listen to all the time. Story 229. Only if I am in the car while the game is on. Local sports broadcasts for the win. Story 230. Yes. There is a compact disc stuck in the player, and I do not own any compact discs anymore. Story 231. Yes, it's not worth connecting my phone to the car for anything less than a half-hour drive, and I'm generally not in the car that long. We're lucky in Chicago to have a couple of really good music stations, so listening to the radio on my way to work isn't a hardship. Story 232. Nope. I'm a metalhead at heart, and my local rock stations play Metallica at best. I pay for Spotify to go advertisement-free and for offline playlists, since there are many cellular dead spots in my state when I travel. Fuck American Telephone and Telegraph Company. I live and breathe Android Auto. Story 233. Yes. It feels more in tune with what is happening right now than any streaming service does for me, and because it includes news, it is more in touch with the world. Story 234. I am a long-haul truck driver. I can remember every Canadian Broadcasting Corporation station on my regular run in Newfoundland. Years ago, when I drove in the United States, I listened to National Public Radio. I used to listen religiously to the program The Signal on Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Music and Radio 2 until it was cancelled. Story 235. We have a really good radio station that plays a lot of classic rock, but not just the usual hits. If it received airplay in the 1970s or 1980s, they will play it, not only the well-known singles. There are hardly any commercials, and they have live disc jockeys. They might play Tightrope by Electric Light Orchestra, Journey of a Lifetime from Journey's progressive rock period, or Song for America by Kansas, along with more familiar tracks. They also play Mama's Pride and the Sherbs, among many others. Story 236. Yes. I had satellite radio for a while when I was driving long distances frequently. It saved me from having to constantly search for another station. I am not doing that anymore, so I listen to local radio now. Story 237. Not really. It is the same 5 songs on repeat, all owned by the same company. iHeartRadio annoys the crap out of me. I listen in my husband's car, though, because he listens to German radio through an application. It is actually very diverse. English, American, German, African, and several other types of music all on one channel. Story 238. Option A. Get in the car, start it, and the radio plays a station I like. If I want something different, I press one button to try the next station. Option B. Get in the car, wait for Bluetooth to connect, find a playlist I like that is not last night's chill-out playlist, scroll through the list, and either stop the car to type a search or use a painfully slow rotating knob to operate an on-screen keyboard, or shout a voice command that never returns what I need. If I want something different, I repeat the clunky process while trying to avoid accidents. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.